The case of an illegal immigrant from El Salvador, he was deported back to El Salvador. Well, now it's heating up, and it's heating up at the U.S. Supreme Court, which has ruled the deportation was illegal and then ordered the Trump administration to, quote, facilitate, close quote, his return.
In a meeting yesterday at the White House, President Trump and the president of El Salvador both said that's not going to happen. Washington correspondent Jenna Browder has the details.
He's done a fantastic job.
Monday at the White House, President Trump hosted El Salvador President Nayib Bukele. Both leaders were pressed on the case of Kilmer Abrego Garcia, a citizen of El Salvador who was deported from the U.S., along with hundreds of other alleged gang members. Bukele says he has no plans to send Abrego Garcia back to the States.
How can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous.
The administration maintains Abrego Garcia is a member of the gang MS-13.
In 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country.
But the Supreme Court ruled that Abrego Garcia's deportation was illegal and ordered the Trump administration to facilitate his return. The White House initially called his deportation an administrative error, noting that Abrego Garcia had a court order protecting him from being sent to El Salvador, where he faced potential danger. The administration now walking that back. White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller telling reporters what would happen if he was brought back to the United States.
He would be deported the second time to El Salvador again because there's no withholding order for an alien who's a member of a foreign terrorist organization, number one. Number two is the gang that he's a member of doesn't exist in El Salvador anymore.
The administration also arguing that courts can't direct foreign policy decisions.
Foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court.
Abrego Garcia's lawyer insists the U.S. government does have the ability to bring his client home.
What we're asking is exactly what the Supreme Court told them. Let's facilitate his return. And we do this all the time. We're asking them to follow the law.
Abrego Garcia has not been charged or convicted of any crimes. He denies any affiliation with MS-13. President Trump created further controversy in his meeting with Bukele when he suggested that homegrown criminals could also be sent to El Salvador. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Well, it's amazing this is just making international headlines. It just seems to me that once he's in El Salvador, he's under their jurisdiction, and if the president of El Salvador says no, he's not going back to the U.S., well then, no, he's not going back to the U.S., and the U.S. Supreme Court doesn't have jurisdiction anymore over him. Well, more news from the administration. The White House Faith Office is holding several special events for Holy Week. Joining us now for more is White House correspondent Kelly Wright. So, Kelly, give us a breakdown of what's happening this week at the White House.
Well, Gordon, let me begin with first by stating what a difference a presidency make, because this time last year, you'll recall that President Joe Biden, and President Trump pointed this out, by the way, that President Joe Biden celebrated the most sacred day on the Christian calendar, celebrating that as a day of transgender visibility. This year, with President Trump at the helm, he is redirecting that, celebrating Jesus Christ. And in going forward and having activities here during this Holy Week, tomorrow night, Wednesday night, they'll have an Easter dinner. And then on Thursday, they'll have an Easter prayer service and worship service for the staff here at the White House. They will meet along with listening to Franklin Graham, as well as Jensen Franklin, as well as Greg Laurie. So it's quite a lineup of people coming here, and this is all being sponsored by the White House and the White House Faith Office.
Well, the president released a proclamation on Palm Sunday honoring the Christian faith. What was in the proclamation, and why is that so important?
It's very important, and here's why. It will mean a lot to bolster the faith of many Christians in America. And I'm going to read some of the excerpts from that proclamation, not the whole thing, but it's very, very in-depth. He goes on to state that this Holy Week, my administration renews the promise to defend the Christian faith in our schools, our military, our workplaces, hospitals, and throughout government. And then he states, we will never waver in safeguarding the right to religious liberty, upholding the gospel, and protecting life and protecting God in our public square. And here's something else, Gordon, that really captured Franklin Graham as well. He stated, as we focus on Christ's redeeming sacrificial love, and to his love and his humility and obedience in helping us in every situation and difficult and uncertain times, we call for and pray for an outpouring of the Holy Spirit upon this nation, upon our nation. Franklin Graham has something to say about that. Watch this.
I think this proclamation is historic. There has not been in my lifetime a president that has communicated the gospel as clearly as he has. And now he's not a preacher, but he's just, this proclamation, he gave one of the best sermons for Easter that many pastors will give from the pulpit. Donald Trump is not afraid of his faith. He's not ashamed of his faith, and he's willing to let the world know it.
Look, no matter what you have to say about the President of the United States, he has his critics, of course, but it can be definitely said that based on his proclamation that he issued and stating that for he and the First Lady Melania Trump, a lot of people will take note of this and know that this president, as Franklin Graham just said, is a man who's not afraid to waver from his faith. Gordon?
Well, Kelly, the president has also introduced a policy initiative on anti-Christian bias, and it's particularly aimed at the federal government. So tell us about it.
Well, I can tell you that began on the day of prayer, the national prayer back on February 7th, and then he created the White House Public Faith Office, as well as the Anti-Christian Bias Task Force, which is under the direction of the Attorney General Pam Bondi. But here's what's happening. The State Department is now, through Secretary of State Marco Rubio, telling its employees, look, if someone is coming against a Christian and showing bias towards them, talk about it. Tell the people about it. They want to eradicate anti-Christian behavior as well as anti-Semitic behavior. This president, as he states in his proclamation, wants to safeguard religion for everyone in this nation.
Well, that's clearly a breath of fresh air. It seems like there's been anti-Christian bias in a lot of things coming out of the federal government in the past years, and I've got to say, it's wonderful to see. Well, Kelly, thanks for joining with us, and may you have a wonderful Easter.
Gordon, thank you very much. And tomorrow, real quickly, a programming note, I'll be interviewing Paula White-Cain as well as Jenny Corner. It'll be my second interview with them. Of course, they are the leaders of the President's White House Faith Office, and we'll get that back to you as soon as we get that done. Thank you, Gordon. God bless you, and happy Easter.
Thank you. In other news, the Middle East Special Envoy made an unexpected announcement in the negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. Steve Witkoff is indicating the United States simply wants Iran to limit its uranium enrichment so that it cannot build nuclear weapons rather than dismantle its entire nuclear program. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has publicly stated that the only acceptable solution for Israel is for Iran to voluntarily dismantle its program or destroy it in a military strike. The next round of talks will come this weekend in Oman. Well, the global Jewish community has been dealing with growing anti-Semitism, including in some unexpected places. For decades, Australia's Jewish community lived in safety. Now the island nation is experiencing a surge in anti-Semitic incidents. Dale Hurd reports.
When two Muslim nurses from the Sydney area hospital were suspended and then charged for boasting in a social media video about killing Jewish patients, it brought Australia's growing epidemic of Jew hatred to the world's attention.
I have a question though. All right, for sure. I have a question though. I have a question. Let's say an Israeli, God forbid.
I won't treat them. I'll kill them.
You'll kill them? So if an Israeli is in Australia and God forbid something happened to him and he comes to your hospital, would you kill him?
You have no idea how many Israeli dog came to this hospital and I sent him to Jahannam.
However, Australia's top Jewish leader told us this is only one of the latest incidents. in what he described as an explosion of anti-Semitism down under. Alex Rivchin is co-chief executive of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry.
A synagogue which was incinerated, a childcare centre, private homes, cars. This is what we've been dealing with in Australia for the past 16 months.
This Melbourne synagogue, founded by Holocaust survivors, was firebombed in December. Arsonists also targeted Rivchin's former home, leaving anti-Jewish graffiti in an attempted attack against him. Australia's top spy chief now says fighting anti-Semitism is his agency's top priority. The nation has a new law against Jew hatred, and anti-Semitism has become an election issue. Rivchin says he's grateful something is finally being done, but says it should have happened sooner, like the day after October 7th, when an Islamic cleric in the streets of Sydney said he was delighted by the massacre, or when this pro-Hamas crowd chanted "Gas the Jews," or when Jewish buildings were vandalized and set on fire.
And there was very little done about this. There was very little political condemnation from the necessary places. There was very little police action. There was an inability to identify these people, and so things cascaded from there. We've seen this play out thousands of times in our history. We know where it leads.
Rivchin says he's hearing some Australian Jews, some the descendants of Holocaust survivors, beginning to say they would feel safer in Israel.
And it's kind of crazy to contemplate that people in Australia in our time feel less safe here than they would in a war zone, fighting on multiple fronts. But the more that these incidents take place and become normalized and happen in every sector, in the hospital sector now, in the universities, the schools and professions, it makes people really question their future in this country.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thank you, Dale. Gordon, back over to you.
It's incredibly disturbing to hear someone who's been charged in a hospital with preserving life to say, I'm killing Jews when they come in to be treated for their illnesses. I'm treating them. And then for someone to say, you know, that should they have an accident, God forbid, and then that you get interrupted. No, I'm praying that they would have an accident. I'm praying that they would be injured so that they could come near me so that I can kill them. This is absolute horror. And how does anyone say, you know, Australia is okay? You look at those individuals, and are they still employed? Do they still have medical licenses after that? And should they ever be allowed back into a medical facility? And the answer from my point of view is clearly no. They should not be allowed to come anywhere near patients because of what they said. And not only did they say they planned violence, they are saying they've already committed it. So where's the investigation on that? The global Jewish community is absolutely suffering right now. And how do we as Christians come alongside them and say, we stand with you? We're against this ideology of hate. We're against all the things that have come against Israel. And it's all based on a genocidal theology, that it's somehow permissible with Allah to go and kill Jews and to wipe them off the map. That thought pattern, that ideology is the main enemy here. And we all, as Christians, need to stand very firmly against it and say, no, not on our watch. We vowed after World War II, never again. Well, never again is right now, and we need to make sure, no, it's not going to happen.